I have always been drawn to the almost mythical, extraordinary accounts of Apache chief Cochise, who conducted a war on the whites after he and his family were betrayed at peace talks with Colonel Bascom. To me, it was so amazing that through a highly disciplined warrior band, his warriors could run or jog on foot for 50 to 70 miles a day, and there was no possibility of the heavy army of the U.S. Army to counteract such mobility. And so they were pretty much undefeated for about 10 or 11 years. And through the use of highly effective smoke signals, Cochise is able to conduct over 10 years of successful war on the whites from his mountain stronghold in the Dragoon Mountains. His warriors would appear from nowhere at all, conduct their strike, and disappear like ghosts. For years, I have held an appreciation for this historical figure in the American West. The true facts in his betrayal and revenge are in his life, and they are more powerful than the most intricately woven Western movie revenge plot. And yet there they are in true history. And so this morning I was going to just look at his life and examine some of the things that we could learn from his life. Recently, an amazing movie became viewable for free on YouTube called The Arrow of Peace. And another great one, if you like free movies, is The Honor of Cochise. It's a bonanza show on YouTube. It chronicles the amazing events. Now, I do 10-point talks for the Faithful Network, and after watching this fine movie, I resolved to do a point talk on lessons from the life of Cochise. Number one, a false accusation can start a decade of war. Cochise was lured in to peace talks under a white flag. And most everybody respected the fact that no matter what side of the war you were on, if it's a peace talk under a white flag, it is to be observed with certain protocol. But Colonel Bascom, after Cochise had already proved the precedent that he was willing to work and be a peaceable individual in the area, Colonel Bascom had him come, he and his family, for peace talks. Now, a 12-year-old boy had been abducted in a ranch recently in Cochise's area, and 20 head of cattle and horse were also taken. Now, because of that, the colonel was called in with 45 infantrymen to recapture the 20 head of cows and horse and this 12-year-old stepson of the rancher. Now, once they got Cochise in the tent and his family, the soldiers surrounded them, and through the interpreter, Bascom accused Cochise of knowing where this 12-year-old son would be and maybe even carrying on the attacks. This infuriated Chief Cochise. He drew his knife, cut the side of the tent open, and sprinted off while they were shooting at him. One of the bullets got him in his leg, but it wasn't a wound that would stop him. Now the army surrounded his family, his brother and his nephews, and took them as hostages. So here, lured to a peaceable talk, all of a sudden they are hostages. And the next day, Cochise came back to speak some more, infuriated by the fact that they took his family as hostages and demanded the immediate release of these hostages. But Bascom would not. Oh, let me back up a little. Cochise told him when he accused him, "Give me 10 days and I will recover this, and attempt to find out who did this and recover this 12-year-old young man." But Bascom would not take him at his word, and thus the misunderstanding began. Well, the guy would not give back the hostages. So even while Cochise was in the tent talking, several Apache emerged out of the ravine and came and captured several of the whites. And then Cochise raided simultaneously on the army stronghold and on other villages and got many more hostages. And then he came within shouting distance to the camp of Bascom and said, "Hey, I have many hostages now. I implore you, let's trade hostages." And yet still, Bascom would not trade hostages. He said, "No, not until the 12-year-old young man is restored." So a false accusation infuriated Chief Cochise and started him on 10 or 11 years of absolute furious war. Any whites going through his area in a stagecoach would be attacked. Ranches and villages would be attacked. U.S. military that would come to the area would be attacked. And Cochise was usually successful in these attacks. Over 10 years, they really lost very few people. And that's an amazing story of military execution. Now, granted, it was kind of during the Civil War era, so U.S. soldiers were maybe not in the great concentration that they could have been with their Gatling guns and all, but still, it's an amazing accomplishment. So, the first point in my talk is a false accusation can start a decade of war, and that's just what it did in this case. The second point is be a person of honor. Jim Bridger, the great Montana mountain man, he always carried within him a distrust of Indians, and many of the mountain men, they executed their life and their survival by not really trusting the red man too much. In fact, one time in Idaho, Jim Bridger's band was approached by a group of Blackfeet, and they said, "We want to make peace." And Bridger said, "No, I think we're all right without that." But one of the Bridger's party was married to one of the Blackfeet, and they said, "No, these guys are all right. I'm married to, my wife is actually related to these guys, and I think there actually will be peace." So Bridger said, "Well, okay," and some of the Blackfeet came into camp, and it started looking pretty peaceful. But then Bridger went out with his hawk and gun across his lap, out to see the chief of the band to make sure this was a real peace. But as Bridger was approaching, there was one of the chiefs there, or one of the warriors there had full arrows and a bow, and Bridger knew how fast they could be, so he cocked his rifle back, and when the chief heard the cock, he lunged at Bridger, pulled him down off of his horse, and began a knife fight while the warrior put 2 or 3 arrows into Bridger, and one of those arrow tips sank deep into his spine and could not be extricated for 2 or 3 years, actually. Can you get me my orange juice, somebody, please? And so the mountain men lived by this code of, well, you can't really trust them. But through all of his dealings, Chief Cochise was shown to be a man of his word, shown to be a man of honor. And that was a really amazing aspect of his character. Some of you might be thinking now, why are you talking about an Indian chief in a church type setting? Well, we've all probably known those people that when we talk about them, we might say, well, man, they're just a good, solid person. I'm not sure if they're a Christian or not, but they're a good, solid person. And sometime I would like to see Christian people have that same solidity of character that maybe some of these guys we talk of in that manner do. So the second point is be a person of honor. The cousin to the second point is the third point. Never lie. Chief Cochise said, never under any circumstances tell a lie. If you have to, say, well, I'll think about it. And think about it and come to a conclusion and then speak out your answer, but never tell a lie. And I thought that's a good point. And it came, that kind of point 2 and 3 brought tremendous respect to Cochise, even though people feared him as an adversary. Point number 4, think carefully about major decisions. Some of my friends have told me one of the reasons we like you is you're so spontaneous. We can show up out of nowhere and the next minute we'll be on a 6-mile Sasquatch hunt with you. And yes, I am a kind of a spontaneous guy and I can make decisions quickly. I remember one time with my dear Mary, I looked at my weather chart of the Grand Canyon while in Austin, and it showed like 7 days of beautiful sunshine. And I said, get ready, honey. Tomorrow we're gonna go and do a 5-day hike in the Grand Canyon. And sure enough, we did. And she said, what? Excuse me. And she was pretty surprised that I was that spontaneous, but it had been on my bucket list for a long, long time. So when I saw a window of weather, I did it. But in other things, in important things, give it enough thought. It was said of Crazy Horse that sometime he'd go out on a bluff and he'd be thinking things through for a day or two even before making an important decision. Some of us, we make decisions so quick. You know, some things we have to. This morning I came in and saw we're almost out of cherries. I sent a text and got some on the way. Little things, sure, be a decisive individual. But sometimes in important things, think it through carefully. I know I sent my son Josiah. He was so smart. It seemed like he really had a solid Christian relationship. And I sent him after he graduated half a year early to Australia to go to Hillsong College for budding Christian musicians. And I thought, what a great opportunity. But it never really occurred to me that he was 17 and a half, he was easily influenceable, and he would be an ocean away. And then at one point he called me and said, Dad, I'm not going to Williams College. He'd been accepted at one of the top colleges in the land. I'm going to stay and play music. We're making a lot of money. And, you know, looking back at that, it probably wasn't smart for me to send a 17-and-a-half-year-old clear across the world, even though it was a good Christian college and whatever. I tell you, in the future, I'm going to think more circumspectly with DJ and everything, because Josiah, in some ways, got in over his head and could have led to some of the mental problems he has now. Anyway, what was that? Point number 5, think it through?
No, that's number 4.
Number 4, think it through.
Carefully.
Number 5, superior army. Superior army. If you're going to do something, train to do it well. Cochise was successful in his military accomplishments for about 10 years just because they had a superior army. They would train relentlessly. His warriors could go 50 to 70 miles jogging a day. Can you imagine that? A horse probably couldn't even do that. And, well, I don't know. I'm not an expert on horses. But he had a superior army. If you're going to be any kind of a leader of a family, of a group, of a business, train well and do what you do well. 3 times now, the FBI has called me, and they're suspicious of me being some kind of an international terrorist, because they say, hey, we notice you're giving money all over the globe. Nigeria, Uganda, Pakistan, India, what is going on? And I said, well, I'm a Christian leader, and I have something called the Faithful Network and whatnot. And I've been able to show them videos and alleviate their concerns that I'm some kind of a terrorist leader. So I am not talking about training an army, but in the case of Cochise, since I'm studying his life, I noticed that they exercised tremendous discipline in what they did. They had a superior army to the whites. And they even devised this amazing way where they'd have their scouts on the various ridge tops, and their scouts would make the fire and then put the buckskin over it and then let it off, and it'd send a smoke puff up, and they calculated what the various smoke puffs in sequence would mean. And so they devised an amazing way to communicate with each other over long distances of space. Even at that rally at Bascom's, Cochise did that and signaled to his braves miles and miles away, and the next day 200 or 300 of his warriors showed up. That's amazing for the time. So, superior army. What was that point number?
5.
5. Number 6. Command respect. Chief Cochise in many ways was a pretty serious individual because he lived in serious times and he had to take things seriously to make sure that his band could survive and thrive in the midst of the changing world. And so he commanded a lot of respect. He didn't put up with much horseplay in his ranks. And it was said that even some of the young native people in and among his camps would not even look in the direction of his abode because they had a kind of a fear, a respect of him. And I think part of the key to him commanding respect was his intelligence. He was a very intelligent guy, and the stuff that he executed well. And that was a lesson as well. I myself, at certain times in my life, I've thought, well, I need to conduct myself in a dignified, serious way. But I realize that's not just me. I'm not a super serious, dignified person. Not that I don't have dignity, but you know, we all got our strengths, and I'm not saying you try to change who you are, but in studying Cochise, that is something that I learned. There was a tremendous respect that his people had for him. And part of it was he was an extremely intelligent guy. He was married to the daughter of Menga, Colorado. And I think Coloradus, and I think that maybe they named Colorado after this guy, Mengus Coloradus. I don't know. I didn't get a chance to check that out. All right, was that 6?
Yes.
Okay. It's kind of a miracle I got this talk together at all, as hard as we all worked yesterday, but I put it together at 6 this morning. Well, and earlier in the week. So, number 7, loyal in friendship. Loyal in friendship. There was a guy named Jeffords. He was the operator of a stage line that went through Apache Pass and through Cochise territory. And he realized that the only way he would ever not lose his inventory, not lose his people, not be attacked going through Cochise country would be to actually make a pact with Cochise himself. Now, Cochise had an amazing stronghold in the Dragoon Mountains that was really a secret. Nobody knew it. If any white person ever did come to know it, they would be instantly terminated so that they wouldn't know it. And he had scouts and sentries and the smoke signals and everything to protect his lair, the center of his operations. The U.S., with all its FBI intelligence, had an incredibly hard time tracking down Osama bin Laden because he was pretty secretive too, and it was a similar type situation. And anyway, this guy named Jeffords, he was kind of an unassuming guy that didn't really get involved in other people's business that much. He liked to be left alone, but he realized that for his business, the stagecoach business, he had to make a pact with Cochise. So somehow or another, he found out where Cochise lived, and he went there all by himself on this suicide mission. Here he is coming with his horse or his mule or whatever he had, all by himself out to Cochise stronghold. Now, anybody that had attempted that before was immediately killed by the Apache warriors. And yet, for some reason, they looked at Jeffords, a guy with a big red beard, and they thought, what is this nut doing? He's just coming out here all by himself. Should we kill him now or later, Cochise? And Cochise says, let's talk to him. He's obviously a brave soul. So he walked right up to Cochise and said, it's an honor to make your acquaintance. I run a stage line, and I'm trying to secure your blessing on what I'm doing. because I know without it, it's a futile attempt. And it was an unlikely beginning of a friendship, but somehow Cochise took to the guy, that he would have that much bravery to come out and see him and to ask his approval like this. And they chummed around for 10 or 11 days together, hunting and doing different things and getting to know one another. And Cochise actually gave Jeffords his approval. And so it was kind of an amazing thing that in Apache territory at the time, any stagecoach, any wagon train, any group of settlers coming through that area would immediately get hounded and taken down by Cochise's warriors, but Jeffords' stages were never touched. And it began a friendship that lasted a long, long time. You think of some of the great friendships that you see in the world. One of the famous ones was Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. There was a great line in Tombstone where Doc Holliday is putting his life on the line to back Wyatt in this firefight. And people are saying, "What's wrong with you, Doc Holliday? Why would you do this for somebody?" And he said, "Do you have many friends?" And the person replied, "Oh yeah, we got a lot of friends." And he said, "Well, I don't, but Wyatt is my friend." And I like that, you know. I've had a handful of good friends in my life, and I value them because I haven't had maybe all that many friends that I could really count on. Yeah, there's a lot of people that come by my business here and we reminisce, and that's great, but as far as close friends that would be with you in a firefight, maybe just a handful. I think of my friend Al Moran. You know, we were good friends. We hunted together for 30 years. We played a lot of music together. We did Christian ministry together. And it was kind of an unlikely thing because he was a party guy that was a great musician that somehow became a Christian. I was a party guy playing in some clubs and we just hit it off. But Cochise and Jeffords hit it off. And they became friends for life. And then when the 10 or 11 war, back to the point that you got to have a superior military, Teddy Roosevelt, the US president, he said, "Under my presidency, we are going to have a strong military. Now, we're going to carry a big stick, and we're going to," oh, I think she put the money there, "but we're going to try not to use it." And a lot of times, if you do have a powerful military as a country, you won't have to use it as much. Under Biden, he gave away all these night vision goggles and many of our superior weaponry to the Taliban, and nobody respected him. So sure, Russia just invaded Ukraine because they knew America was incompetent at the time. But anyway, Jeffords built a bridge of friendship with Cochise. And after 10 or 11 years of demonstrating military superiority, the US government wanted to negotiate with Cochise. If you got a superior military, there will be those that want to negotiate. So President Ulysses S. Grant sent a Christian guy, a General Howard, to try to negotiate peace with Cochise. Now, Howard was a Christian guy, and so he respected the native people. He believed that all men were created equal. He didn't look down on them as some like Custer did. but he respected them. And Jeffords talked with him at length, and he said, you know, I like your thoughts, I like the respect that you have for the native people, but how should I possibly trust to bring you to my friend Cochise? And he said, because I genuinely want peace, and I'm authorized by President Grant to bargain for peace. And so amazingly enough, Jeffords trusted this guy and brought him into Cochise's stronghold that no white man had ever come in and left alive except for Jeffords. And because his friend Jeffords has brought him in, Cochise respected the guy, and they talked, and they dialogued for for about 10 days. And Cochise said, well, how would we know that even the great chief, what if the great chief dies and the next chief doesn't honor the agreement that we make? And Howard assured him that he would. And so Cochise said, I want these Dragoon Mountains. I want this area where I've grown up and where I've ranged free. I want it as our reservation. And at first Howard says, no, there's no way you're going to get these areas here as your reservation. We got a little spot in New Mexico, we'll take you. And Cochise said, no way, man. Do you really want the bloodshed that I am capable of delivering to continue? Give us this, and it will stop. And eventually, Howard went back and forth with Ulysses S. Grant, and they agreed to give him this amazing reservation, which was a big one, and it encompassed all of what Cochise wanted. And so I thought to myself, isn't this amazing that this guy Jeffords, he made friends with Cochise, and later he was able to usher in this general to make peace with Cochise and bring about an end to the bitterness. And I thought about the gospel. The Bible says that you and I, we were alienated from God. We were enemies of God. We were in our minds and in our actions going against His command, His kingdom, His ways. And yet, through Christ, God has brought peace and brought an end to the hostility and the division. I myself was thinking about it and was thinking, yes, but there has to be a friend involved. There has to be somebody who bridges the gap. And in my life, I thank God that there was a couple of guys that I made friends with that were able to introduce me to Christ. And there was in a high school a very, very popular athlete that everybody respected and thought was so cool. And all of a sudden, the news came about that this person had become a Christian. So everybody wanted to know how they became a Christian. And they came to her and said, we see that you've become a Christ follower. How in the world did this happen? And they were expecting a famous evangelist message or a high-profile person that made the inroads. But this girl said, it was little Jenny in my science class. And nobody really knew little Jenny. But Jenny made a bridge of love from my heart to hers, and Christ walked over the bridge. And I thought, wow, it's just like Jeffords. He made a bridge of love between his life and Cochise's life, and the Christian general that ushered in peace walked over that bridge. And so let's be those. This could be another point. Where we at, Jerry? What point we at? Huh?
Number 7, loyal in friendship.
Loyal in friendship. So let's be those who are loyal in friendship. And maybe, just maybe, Christ can walk over the bridge of that friendship from our life to perhaps the life of somebody that may not yet be a Christ follower. You know, at the end of Cochise's life, he asked Jeffords, "Do you think there's life after this death?" And Jeffords says, "I'm really not sure, but I'm hoping there is." And Cochise says, in our culture we have a thought that true friends will never be separated, that they'll be up in the sky in the afterlife and be friends even in the afterlife. And you know, I don't know if anybody actually brought the gospel to Cochise, but Cochise said, "Well, I hope it's true, but I don't really know if it's true, but I hope it's true." Well, you know, the wonderful thing about the gospel of Christ is that we can know of a certainty the truths. John 3:16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that whoever believes on him shall not perish, but have everlasting life." That's a certainty. That is a certainty. And when Cochise died, Jeffords and a small band of the Apache Kirichaha leaders took him to a secret ravine and deposited him down into this crevice. And nobody to this day ever knows where it really was, because Jeffords held in honor even to his deathbed and never told anybody. So it's kind of interesting that old Cochise is up there in some crevice and nobody really knows where or what it is. But Jeffords was loyal in friendship, and it led to the ceremony of blood brother, where they each made an incision and mixed their blood, thus saying, "Though we're not brothers in the natural birth canal, we are brothers now. We are of the same blood." And you know, I had a blood brother when I was growing up, a young man named Jimmy Grant, and we both had 3 sisters and no brothers. So we always wanted a brother, and we were mates from a young age, fishing and hunting and climbing mountains mostly. We did a lot of mountain climbing together. And one time we said, "Man, we don't ever want to be separated. Let's become blood brothers." So we each made an incision and we mixed our blood together, and that's a powerful bond. But that's how strong the bond between Cochise and Jeffords became, that they became blood brothers. That, by the way, some of you may notice that I am vehemently against the infiltration of $270 million worth of marijuana into Montana with the legalization of it. I was one of the main guys that resisted that, and I resist it to this day. Partly why is my brother Jimmy, I introduced him to marijuana, and before I did, he was a strong, powerful guy. He played football, he was an outdoorsman. But once I did, he became a pothead. All he wanted to do was get stoned and laugh and be goofy, and I realized that I did him a tremendous disservice by introducing him to marijuana, and that's part of my gift to his family as restitution, that I resist marijuana's infiltration into the hearts and minds of so many young people. But anyway, let's wrap this up. So, point 8, trust is like a bridge. It's difficult to rebuild a second time. Cochise had been invited to the peace talks with Colonel Bascom and then surrounded and had to knife his way through the tent and sprint off with people shooting at him. Can you imagine ever trusting a white man again after something like that happened to you? I don't think so. And for Cochise, it was tremendously hard to trust or even have peace talks again. That's why Jeffords had to usher the general to Cochise's strongholds, because he wasn't going to put himself in a vulnerable thing again. Like the old saying goes, you might burn me once, and that's on you, but burn me twice, and that's on me. And so trust is like a bridge. We got to be careful to build trust with people. Excuse me, I need a drink. We've got to be careful to build bridges of trust to other people. But we also realize that if something comes that breaks that trust, it's difficult to rebuild a second time. So we got to be careful not to do things that break our bridges of trust with other people. And in the movie An Arrow of Peace, when Jeffords and the General Howard said they wanted peace, in the movie, I don't know if this was a true fact, but Cochise said, all right, I will put a stone in this significant spot for every day that we can walk in peace with the white man. If we walk in peace for 40 days, I will agree to this treaty, because he didn't think they could do it for 3 days, much less 40 days. But in the movie, each day that went by, he would put a stone there, and eventually 40 stones were there. And so when trust has been broken with us and somebody else, we have to rebuild that trust carefully. And each day of rebuilt trust becomes like a stone. And maybe once you get 40 days or have been trustworthy over a period of time, the other person will trust again. And the final point,
Only 9 points?
and the final point, Cochise was a man of great contradiction. It was said that Cochise actually had 2 wives. He was married to the daughter of Mingus Colorados, and then later he took another wife. But somebody said, I don't know if it's true, but somebody said that sometime he was given to drinking, and when he did, he was a crazy guy, he'd even have physical altercations with some of his wives and stuff, and so here he is, such an honorable leader, and yet he's a man of contradiction. He can, on the one hand, have a dry wit, and on the other hand, fly into a vengeful rage and whatnot. So the subject of contradiction of character is an interesting one. It was said of the Bible character Daniel that Daniel really didn't have any faults, that the other satraps and administrators were looking at him trying to find fault with Daniel, and they couldn't find any fault in Daniel's personal life or in his administration of the kingdom. But that's not most of us. Most of us deal with some contradiction of character. I myself, I've been a Christian now for 42 years, but before that, I was a playboy. And, I'd listen to these Christian talks about purity rings and saving your virginity, and I just think, well, that's certainly not me, man. There's been parties where I kissed 2 girls in the same party and stuff like that, and I'm a new creature in Christ, but some of those memories, they are still with me. Some of those memories from my past life and the way that I was, and since I've been a Christian, I've lived a life that is pretty upstanding. Faithful to one woman for 23 years till she divorced me. Faithful to Mary in our marriage now for 10 and a half years. And yet, even though I'm a believer, I still have memories. I still have temptations. I fight and deal with some contradiction of character myself. How about you? Are you perfect like Daniel, or do you deal with some contradiction of character?
We're not perfect at all.
And yet I find it interesting that even though it was pretty obvious to everybody that Chief Cochise had a good deal of contradiction of character, he wasn't the perfect role model in every respect all the time, people still respected him and they still followed him. So that's a good word for us to realize that even if we have some contradiction of character, it does not disqualify us from being a great human being, a great individual, a great person in this world that can be looked up to. And that's my talk, and God bless you.